Human design is a part science, part spiritual system that tells you who you came here to be. You have your own blueprint, your own way of becoming successful, your own way your dreams are going to come true, the way you'll experience the most joy and fulfillment. The instruction manual for how to move through the world is custom to you. When you act according to that manual, when you act as the real you, everything in life comes to you with more ease and less resistance. We all know we're different, yet we're still acting like there's one way to do life. Let's talk about it. To find out your design and the designs of the people in your life, you can visit myhumandesign.com or download the My Human Design app in the App Store and on Google Play. There is a lot going on in the world around us right now, and it's almost like it's a lot in every direction. So you feel upside down and also upright. You feel joyful and you also feel hopeless. You feel limitless and you also feel limited. So I want to acknowledge first that everybody is experiencing that same thing. One of the main invitations behind why that energy is such a mixed bag right now is because it is asking us to do something, do an up level. And one of the big up levels right now is kind of cutting the fluff and focusing on what's important and really finding, I know it's so cliche, but really finding our inner truth. What do we mean when we say inner truth? We mean, what are the values that are so important to you that you prioritize them over anything else so that you don't allow your attention and your energy to be bought or acquired by other people? So one of the things that I think helps our mind get really tight and right is balancing our spirituality and our goal to improve ourselves, to expand, with a desire and a deep need in this world to use a little bit of healthy cynicism, a little bit of questioning everything, and realizing that you have an inner parent that can monitor every single piece of information that comes your way. So what we don't want to be doing anymore is just swallowing everything that we feel comes to us whole. And there are so many people who speak so confidently about their truth or about something that they feel passionately about, but that doesn't mean that we need to just accept them and accept everything they're saying because they seem so confident in it. And that's one of the big illusions right now, is that, there are people who really want to serve and they're going to be telling you things that are incorrect for your alignment. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is there are people who are confidently saying things that they don't even believe, or that they are saying to get shiny carrots for themselves and using your attention and your energy to get those things. So I'll give you some super basic examples. What happens in this echo chamber that is a globalized world with social media, with hyper easy connections, is that we believe a solid enough statement, and then if it makes just enough sense to us and we semi-like it, we pass it on parrot fashion, meaning we pass it on without necessarily filtering it or questioning it through our own lens. So for example, how many people do you know who speak about a calorie? And this is me with my science head on, okay? How many people who speak about a calorie know what a calorie actually is? A calorie is the energy required to raise a cubic centimeter of water by 1 degree. Okay? So if we knew that, I often think about this, if we knew that and everyone had that basic understanding of it, then we would be much more likely to be able to discern in our own minds how relevant that feels to us when we're counting how much, how relevant it is to our food choices, for example. And it doesn't mean that they're irrelevant, because they're absolutely not, and they're not irrelevant either. But because we are just spat the tropes, we've almost become used to not asking why, not wondering why, and not trying to dig further for ourselves so that we can feel like we have substantiated it and integrate it as a truth for ourselves. So my invitation is, when you hear all this advice, literally before you soak it in, just think to yourself, does all parts of me agree with this? And if there's a part of me that's a little bit like, I'm not sure, instead of quieting that one and shushing it down, address that part too. Absolutely go with the parts that feel like it's resonating. But also if there's a part that's like, I don't know, because I'll tell you why. There's so many Emperor's New Clothes in the world right now, and they're all going to come down. Would you want to be someone who had their time and energy bought by all of that Emperor's New Clothing? Or would you want to preserve your time and energy and invest it on your own alignment and use everything that's coming to the outside and curate it to actually suit you? It's like all this information is here for you. Be selfish. Use the ones that you feel are going to move the needle forward on your life. And let's not be sheep anymore and just accept what everyone is telling us. I'll give you another example. Right now, there's a very big emphasis on protein. And the reason why we get said that it's important is because protein is important for building muscle, and muscle is a key to longevity. Now, there is a truth to that. Like everything, there's a truth and an untruth. However, we also know, if we sit back a little bit, there's so many other things that go into longevity. Not just muscle. How about flexibility? How about, healthy joints? How about, and then take it wider, how about a good mindset? How about, having a body that is alkaline enough? Whatever it is, like you could come up with, if I challenge you to think about 10 things that lead to longevity, you will come up with 9 other things that are not just muscle, right? But we've been siloed into these thought patterns because they just get repeated over and over and over at us. And isn't it that thing where if you hear something 7 times is when you start to kind of pay close attention to it? So I'm saying we need to be the guard dogs of what we let into the real estate of our mind and our consciousness, because that is the most important thing in all of life. So here's another one. What is an alkaline food? And everybody uses the example of the lemon, tastes acidic, but it's actually alkaline. Alkalinity is actually dependent on, there are 5 alkaline minerals that the body likes to use for so many different processes, and it helps maintain aliveness and a well-functioning body. Now, an alkaline food is simply a food that net deposits more of one of those minerals than it leaches. So the reason why dairy is acidic is because it leaches the body of calcium. Coffee leaches the body of iron. That's why these things are acidic, because net, once the body has consumed and processed and eliminated those foods, is it more rich in those 5 mineral ashes or less? So I believe, I haven't looked this up for a while, but off the top of my head, I think they are calcium, potassium, iron, phosphorus, I want to say manganese. It could be magnesium. I'm actually not sure. You'll correct me on that, T, if I'm wrong.
I have no clue.
That's from 16 years ago, so I might need a refresh. But it's something along those lines. So it's not just about whether those foods contain those things. It's about whether they actually take more or give more. So, these are just a couple things of behind the scenes knowledge that I believe that if we kind of dug further and gave ourselves the importance of managing what we choose to buy into, what we choose to grab our energy and our attention and our prioritization, then that's kind of how we navigate this time when there is so much. It's like being in a washing machine right now. It's like you're up one next, you're down the next, you're up one next, you're down the next. And the key is actually not to really need to know whether it's all good or whether it's all bad. It's more about, okay, well, if I'm being challenged right now, I kind of need to double down on what are the very few things that I do know, that I do care about, not what everyone tells me to care about, that's going to make me belong or cool or get me fans on socials and, make me quick money. No. What is it that if I'm playing the 50-year-long game, when all these trends are going to come and go, and you think about things that everyone was doing 3 years ago that we've completely forgotten about, how much of what we're doing today is going to be the same way? So I think that question everything is now the necessary swing in order to balance all the amazing expansion of consciousness we've been doing recently. And actually, common sense is a part of consciousness, because it's taking the reins back of saying, I've opened myself to up all this consciousness and open it all in and want to better myself, and let me go and see and seek. And now is the time to be the sovereign chooser of, none of this information has a hold over me. I get to choose it, and it is in service to me. If it's not in service to me, I just sign out of that conversation, and I choose for it to become irrelevant in my life. And there's no one else who's going to tell me or give me the permission slip or tell me it's right to make that irrelevant. I have to be okay with being potentially the only person in the world who it's irrelevant for, and that's absolutely fine.
What this is bringing to mind is that it's really precious that we are at this point where we're kind of we have an addiction to information. And it makes sense, because this is like the first time in history that humans have had access to information in this simple of a way. But I think now need to start seeing our relationship to that access a little bit more differently. And instead of gorging ourselves on information, utilizing this entity, because honestly, everything has consciousness. I definitely believe there's like a consciousness to the internet, a consciousness to this thing that allows us to distribute ideas and to draw learning to us via this thing. Remembering that we don't need to like go on the internet even to find these things. We're going on and we're going, I need to find these answers. I need to find these answers. And we're taking in an addictive kind of way, instead of thinking taking a slow information consumption approach of, oh, okay, if I'm seeking answers and everything has consciousness, this tool can actually will bring me the pieces of information that are actually relevant to me, and seeing it as a tool for that, rather than having to like dive face first and figure things out in there ourselves.
And that's the main principle behind human design, which is that your mind is not given to us in order to make our life decisions. The mind is supposed to be observing the world around us and coming up with cool shit. We are addicted to this idea that if the mind can know everything, then we will be well, we will be good, we will be thriving, we will whatever. And the reason why we do that is because we are so disconnected from that direct line we have with the universe that is through our authority, right? We haven't used it. We haven't been taught to use it. So we don't trust that we can just be guided magically towards our dreams. And our dreams are exactly where we're supposed to be going. And the universe made that and has a plan for you to get there if you just, work with it rather than just rely on your mind. But because we haven't experienced that enough times compared to how many times we've experienced trying to control everything with our mind, all the mind is doing is feeding its addiction. And one of the early human design textbooks talk about, let's say, for example, you were trying to make the best decision about what the healthiest food is on the planet. And before you made your decision, what would you need to do in order to fully know that based on information? It would be an incomplete conclusion unless you read every single study, every single bit of information. And that would last so many lifetimes for you to know all of that. So any decision then that you're making based on your mind and gathering information is incomplete. And that's kind of how information is meant to be, because as humans, we're always discovering more. We're always learning more. Our world is changing, right? So it's an amazing thing that we never arrive at the final answers in terms of like scientific research and what we know about the universe. Like, it's always expanding. So we can't, it's actually inane to think that an ever expanding realm of information is going to give us the most cohesive, big, complete answer at any given time, when actually for our machines, which is our bodies, which is where it dictates what we do and where we go in physical time and space, then there's a much, much simpler, but weirdly actually much more complex, you're just not in charge of the complexity, thing at play, which you can listen to, which is your emotions or your gut. And I was saying to you earlier on, Taylor, like, I'm the most skeptical person when it comes to this stuff. I question it every day. I'm 10, 11 years into human design, and I'm still shocked when things that I really wanted came to me because I got invited and because I made myself available for those invitations as a projector. And I used that, which is call my strategy in human design. And it seems so basic, and it seems so annoyingly, you have to wait and you have to be patient and you have to not be in control. And that's what's annoying. And you don't have to wait a long time, but you just have to wait for the situation to arrange itself in a way that you can't really understand. So doing my strategy and listening to my authority, which is my emotions, sometimes I cackle at myself about how simple it is. Like me wanting to go somewhere, I actually wanted to not go somewhere yesterday. I talked myself into going, and then there was literally an emergency that stopped me from being able to go. Nothing to do with me, but just, these things that the universe is always redirecting us. And ironically, the more you use your authority, the more quickly you see the response in your life. We've talked about this before, where the more you've been using your spleen, the more quickly you see the ramifications of not listening to it, and the more quickly you see the benefits of when you do listen to it. It's like time speeds up. The gap between the cause and the effect shortens so much. So, really this time is not saying to not take in any information, but to really do it to serve you. Like think about you treating yourself like a king or a queen and saying, okay, if I am like the most precious being on planet Earth to me, which you are, because you are tasked with looking after this fragment of the universe, the divine in you, more than you are tasked with looking after anything else, what would I do to serve it instead of enslave it? What would I do to help it become radically individualized, even though that's sometimes terrifying, instead of talk it into smallening and boxifying it into being a sheep just because the mind is telling you that has more of a chance of safety and being like other people and not being judged and having other people's ways kind of be something that you can jump on to hopefully mean that it's also your way, and that will make your process quicker. I love that Marcus Weston, when I interviewed him, he said, if you skip the process, you lengthen the process. And that's really what it is that we're trying to do. And I have nothing against hacking and all this kind of thing. But I do think that if we're doing it to the extent that we are trying to avoid learning us and learning our individual machine, which we have to learn it so that we can honor it, so that we can serve it, so that we can take care of it. If we skip that learning, then someone else's way is never going to be satisfactory or sufficient.
So is what you're, I guess, recommending to us in this time is to be conscious of the information we're taking in, or be conscious of the amount of information that we're taking in, readjusting the way we take in information? What would you say is like the, advice that you're wanting us to take from this?
I mean, all of those things we do get told, less information and less, social media all the time. I don't know if I'm not saying that's ever a bad thing, but I'm not saying that that's the balance of what we need to do with our consciousness right now, which is the balancing is the questioning, is the filtering, is the I got so convinced that this was the truth. Let me think it through for a second. If I feel like it's not completely working for me, can I give myself the permission to change my mind or pivot by 1 degree? Can I do this person's way but slightly make it my own? And can I be bold enough and care about myself enough to be like the only person who's going to certify that decision, and not have to find evidence other people are doing it, or justify it to myself, or justify it to other people, or know why it's going to work better for me or not. So I'm focusing more for us on the curation and the questioning. The examples that I used are some ones that are really swirling around right now, like the muscle is the key to longevity. Sure, it's achy, I'm sure, but there are others. And so do we want our whole days to be hijacked by only thinking about protein, or thinking about protein even 5% of your brain or 2% of your brain? So, and then showing that, and then demonstrating that, and then reading more about that. And you know how it is, like we all get caught in these rigmaroles, or anything else that you are feeling like you so need to buy into. Can you just be a little bit more, that doesn't make sense? And you know, the other thing, like politically too. And you have to question everything. You have to question what people are saying. You have to question the lovely sounding tropes. You have to question the passionately engaged speakers and speeches and advocates and friends and people who have different opinions. The real magic is being open to hearing anything, and also having the safety catch in everything that you hear to let it in, or just let it wash over you, and be okay with having conflicting opinions than other people who seem very convinced, and not letting ourselves be so impressionable, because we've gotten very impressionable. And that's the sort of spiritual maturation that needs to happen now, is let's become less impressionable. Let's become more discerning, and not discerning of the entire world, because my thing has to apply to everyone in order for me to believe in it myself. But if, like I was saying, if I'm the only person who prioritizes this, sees life this way for me, I'm completely okay with that.
Ooh, the word impressionable. What's interesting is that our brains are actually designed to function in a way that does kind of make us pretty impressionable, especially in a world where, you know, these algorithms are feeding us the same information over and over again. Especially if you're tapping like, it's going to bring you more and more and more of that. And it kind of puts us into a pattern of like, this is reality, this is true. That's just how our brains function. And bringing this up at a time when we are going to be entering a really important time politically, especially in America. Oh, wow. That paying attention to how impressionable we are. I can't drive that home enough.
Yeah. And just remember not to jump on bandwagons, because unless it is a bandwagon, I mean, listen, if you're aligned, you should be driving your own ship. But with bandwagons, you know, unless they are moving your priority in life forward, they are giving you a false sense of excitement. You know, their sort of adrenaline is going up. You feel like you belong to something. You feel like you're being carried forward by a different cause. But you need to kind of remember that, you know, there's that saying, if you're not paying, you're the one being sold. It's always that there's someone else who's benefiting more off you or us being, you know, caught up in the net of some other thing. And I think the point about this time is the energy is so swirly that you can just let yourself be swept off your feet and literally feel like you're out of your mind, you know, like when we say you lose your mind, like you lose your sense of you being the one who directs where your mind is going to go, where your consciousness is going to go. And that happens when we willingly give it away to sometimes complete strangers, but also sometimes the person that we live next to and sleep next to.
I don't know if this ever happens to you where, you know, you're in conversation with people, because I think, like I said, we're all so susceptible to being impressionable with our minds. Does it ever happen to you where you're in conversation and you hear yourself say something just because it just kind of fits the situation, and you're like, wait a second, did that even come from me? Like, did I even think that thought? Or is there something in this that reminded me of something I've consumed before, and it came out of me in that way? Does that ever happen to you?
I think I don't spit out other tropes, and I think I'm very careful to do this sort of filtration process at this point, because I think I spent my whole 20s feeling like I was so having to do things other people's way. But there's so many things. Sometimes, you know, the one I used to really do all the time was bump into someone that I semi-like or maybe semi-dislike, and, oh, let's see each other soon, or text me, or da-da-da. And then, you know, eventually you just sort of realize, like, empty words are just a cost to your soul, you know? But yeah, sometimes you do say, where did I get that from? Like, you know, actually, sometimes I'll hear myself say things that my parents would have said to me. And I'm like, oh, that's not my thought. Now I get to curate it, right? So in answer to your question, actually, yes. I'm sort of already quite good at the informational one, but sometimes, you know, with kids, for example, you know, friends' children, I'll sometimes say things to them and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to, you know, baby voice them, or I don't want to tell them to do that. Whatever.
It's like patterns we've picked up on.
Yeah. And if we're not consciously choosing it, we got it from somewhere else.
Right. And so I asked that because we did a workshop. I believe it's last month's workshop that has to do with the scaffoldings of the mind. And you gave some example of how even just like changing up something in your day to day, for example, like painting your nails red when you never do that, kind of just like helps. Maybe you can explain that a little bit better than me, but you're making me in this conversation think about the fact that even the way we take information, even having us challenging ourselves to have a slightly off kilter own perspective on all the information that we take in is actually a really big benefit to us.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're just shaking the silos that you can just get into and be carried into, right? Because when you pivot slightly, that's when you break free. That's when you shake the system a little bit in the scaffolding of your mind. I go so much deeper into this in the workshop, which is in the app from last month. If you listen to the podcast and you have the app, make sure that you check out the New Paradigm series or the workshops, because they are much deeper dives on these kind of conversations. We talk about all the energy changing and what's going on in the world and how to prepare our consciousness for them. But yes, it's every time you remember that you have control over everything in the outside world that seems to have control over you because it feels physical, that's when you come into your sovereignty. That's when you become a powerful creator of your life. That's when you actually remember how strong you are, right? You have to act in the way, you have to choose the actions of a person that is strong and sovereign, only to realize that you are strong and sovereign. But if you don't try it on for size, you could spend your whole life behind that door and never opening it and never seeing that it was right there all along. And that's why so many of us walk around feeling helpless and hopeless, because we just don't open the door. We just don't practice. Like, oh, of course there's a part of me that knows how to question things and knows how to be sovereign and knows how to choose for myself. Let's try this today. And so this time is also very graceful because we can try it without too much negative ramification. You know, we can, it's not quote unquote too late that we're being forced to be sovereign. You know, we are getting closer to that, but this would be an amazing time to be your own permission slip and be your own self-advocate, not of the entire world, but just of your system. And at the same time, and this one's really hard, practicing letting other people advocate for things and their own alignment in sometimes ways that your ego isn't going to like. But if you really love people, you are going to want to celebrate their differences and not make them do things they don't want to do, not make them agree with you on things they don't agree with. And in that, also practice you being fine with whatever's going on in the outside world and you being okay because you've gotten ever stronger in your little list and roadmap of what you have decreed has suited you.
And last week, David mentioned something about this time, because we keep talking about this time, right now. He mentioned something about how this time in history, according to Kabbalah, is about all of the light and love that hasn't been let into the world yet is meant to be coming in right now. Is this process, would you say this practice is kind of a part of that process? And can you speak to that a little bit more? I don't know if you have any other perspective on that, but I was really curious about that.
Yeah, well, I think what's happening is that a lot of us, we all are looking for light. You know, you've heard that saying, I think it's from A Course in Miracles, we're looking for God in the wrong places. And so what is God? God is certainty. God is alignment. God is light and life and feeling alive and so many other things. And so where we're seeking for it in false places, right? We're seeking to glom on to other people's light or other people's certainty and hope that it's going to stick on ours, right? or we're looking for the quick fixes for that feeling of feeling false light, is now needing to be cleansed out, because we need to connect to the real light, which is finding your own path, doubling down on what's important to you. And in order to do that, in order to have that sort of warrior's devotion to creating light from yourself, from your connection with above, you've got to pull out and pull the plug from the places where we're seeking the false light that actually is doing the entire opposite thing, and contracting our own ability to realize that there is a connection that we have to the universe, to God, to the creator above, that is always there, and it's going to rush in the second we decide to sign out of where we've been thinking that it came behind but never was, and a place that we therefore have not earned in our own unique way, our unique connection, our own unique expression of light, which we have to earn by going up and using that direct line, that hotline that we all have to the universe, instead of believing that this physical reality is where we can source it from.